All the young dudes from MsKingBean89, Chapter 75, 5th year, The Surprise.
So inviting, so enticing to play the part. I can play the wild mutation as a rock and roll star. Get it on. I could do with the money. I'm so wiped out with things as they are. I send my photograph to my honey, and I'd come on like a regular superstar.
Saturday, 20th September 1975. Over the next 3 weeks, Remus managed to fall into a somewhat more comfortable routine as he learned to navigate his newfound feelings. Once upon a time, he might have simply tried to avoid Sirius, to withdraw and hide in the library in one of his little corners. But he had learned that this never worked in the end, especially when you shared a bedroom. And, at any rate, he was far too big for most of his old cubbyholes now. So he simply tried to cope, and in trying, found that he could. Not that it was easy exactly, but he had so much else to worry about. On top of prefect duties, which already had Remus up and down the castle for patrol duties and meetings, it was an important year for their studies. With hours coming up, the teachers were loading them up with more work than ever, and there had been a noticeable shift in the syllabus. In Transfiguration, they were learning concealment. In Charms, they practiced disarmament. Potions was largely focused on identifying and counteracting poisons. And Defense Against the Dark Arts seemed to be nothing but drill after drill of attack and defense spells. They were training for war, and everyone knew it. Care of magical creatures was a grim affair. Professor Kettleburn was a grumpy, barking old man with half his limbs missing and an eye patch. He didn't bring anything in for them to look at or tell them stories of his encounters with fantastical beasts. He preferred to recount how he'd gotten all of his various injuries, and it was always horrible. Remus tried to spin this in a positive way. At least without Ferrex there was one less distraction. There was no way he was going to develop a crush on crusty old Kettleburn. Sirius was quite enough to contend with. Though he managed to simply smile through his feelings most of the time, they seemed to surface at the most inopportune moments. He'd be reading a book, and there it was, or completely alone in the library, and a memory would pop up, stirring his insides. It left him often shaken, hot and confused. If this had been how James and Mary and Marlene and Peter and everyone else involved in the stupid slugging business had been feeling for the past 2 years, then Remus simply didn't know how any of them got anything done. It seemed his body and mind were constantly at war. He wasn't stupid. He knew he was something of a late bloomer where that sort of thing was concerned. The summer after he turned 13, Matron had called him into her office and asked him in the vaguest of terms possible how much he knew about marital relations. He wasn't sure how much he ought to know, and didn't want to look stupid, so he just said he knew everything. She nodded and told him to ask a male member of the staff if he had any questions. Of course he never had. They also once had a talk from the local vicar about the sanctity of marriage and the sinful nature of acting on basic urges, but Remus had been so mortified that he had blocked out most of that. Base urges. It wasn't something you were supposed to talk about seriously. At least not with other boys. You knew that much. Jokes were okay. At least you were in safe territory if you just teased each other. But you certainly couldn't ask questions. The other marauders were ahead of him. Some nights, close to the full moon, he had caught the scent of their lust, had heard their quiet ache in moments of frustration and shame as they fumbled under the bedsheets in the dark. It just embarrassed him. Of course Remus did. Of course he had, but that just felt like maintenance. No more meaning assigned to it than brushing his teeth. Ever since the past summer, though, things in that department had changed, become more urgent, as if snogging Grant had activated him in some way, unleashed a great flood of feelings. Remus rarely thought of anything else. He was constantly on edge. For once, he was grateful for the billowing black robes they were required to wear at Hogwarts, but even then, he often found himself having to stay seated longer than everyone else sometimes, trying to think neutral thoughts. Once, he had to cover his lap with a particularly heavy book, simply because McGonagall had said one book too many times. He felt changed on the inside. It was present in every moment, whether he was alone or in company. and serious. Why did it have to be serious? Okay, he knew why. It's the way his thin white skilled shirt hung off his back, the way his hair fell into his eyes so that he had to push it back, even though he never, ever tucked it behind his ears. His hands, his fucking eyes. It had been a very trying 3 weeks. Remus was grateful that the first full moon of the term had fallen on the weekend. It meant that he could sleep and lounge around peacefully, waiting for nightfall, rather than sitting through hours of lessons, bones aching on hard wooden seats. Saturday was also Quidditch practice day. Actually, ever since James had become captain, Quidditch practice was almost every day, leaving Remus completely, blissfully undisturbed. He had slept most of the morning, then wandered downstairs for lunch before returning to the quiet of an empty bedroom. He read his book for a while, but feeling achy and restless, soon gave up. He wished the moon would hurry up and come so he could get it over with. Waiting for it was the worst part. He closed his eyes, stretching out, then decided he was sick of lying down. He climbed off his bed and went to sit on the windowsill with a pack of cigarettes. The last he had from the summer, given to him by Grant as a leaving gift. Grant. If Grant was here, at Hogwarts, would Remus feel the same about Sirius? Probably, he sighed to himself. And Grant was so canny at that sort of thing, he'd work it out right away. Maybe he would have some advice. If only he could call him, or even write a letter. But he was only allowed to send hours to Matron. And what if she read it? Remus wished he had the compact mirrors James and Sirius had. Though how on earth he would explain them to Grant, he had no idea. He finished his first cigarette and started on another. It was soothing. Weed was better. He'd had some after his last full moon, but he hadn't seen anyone at Hogwarts smoking it. He was on the outs of the smoking set anyway, as he was no longer supplying. The past summer's distractions had cost him in more ways than one. Evening was drawn in, and Remus's stomach began to rumble. He tried to eat light on the full moons, anticipating the pain which sometimes made him sick. In the days afterwards, he would be ravenous, and could easily manage 3 or 4 plates per meal. He was just about to get up and go down when the door opened. Peter, James and Sirius walked in, with very curious looks on their faces. James looked very serious and quite cautious, as if he had to deliver some news and wasn't sure how Remus would take it. Remus knew it couldn't be bad news, though, because Sirius was grinning from ear to ear, showing every one of his perfect, pearly white teeth. Peter was wringing his hands, as usual, but each ear had a small, wicked smile, the look he had when they were in the middle of a particularly devious prank. "Oh, God," Remus said, before James could speak. "What now? Why do you Quidditch?" "No Quidditch today," Sirius said, still grinning like a maniac. The energy coming off him was electric, burning hot. He was clearly extremely excited about something. "Where have you been then?" Remus asked, choosing to look at James instead to keep his voice level. "We've been practicing something else," Peter burst out, biting his bottom lip. Remus leaned back on the windowsill and looked at James again, raising a questioning eyebrow. James swallowed, his Adam's apple bobbing, then cleared his throat. "Mooney," he said, "you may remember we had an idea in 3rd year." "You have ideas all the time, Pa. Be specific," Remus said, irritably, lighting his 3rd cigarette. His shoulders hurt, and his neck. He wasn't in the mood for games on a full moon. They should know this by now. To help you with the... I know you said we shouldn't, James ran his hand through his hair. But we had already got so far with it, and... Look, I'm sorry, we're sorry, but... Spit it out, Remus sighed, exhaling the smoke. James looked panicked. He glanced at Sirius, then looked at his feet. "We become animagus." "What?" "Oh, for Merlin's sake," Sirius said, stepping forward. "Look, Remus." And with that, Sirius promptly transformed into a very large black dog, and Remus fell off the window ledge in shock.